Great, you guys. Thank you for showing up and thank you for coming on our Leadership Exchange platform. Welcome to Leadership Exchange. I'm Husna Syeda, an executive leadership coach, a transformation architect, and founder of Leadership Exchange, and I coach visionaries, my coaching platform. Today, we are exploring one of my most favorite topic, the hidden work of alignment. Alignment is not created by any of the strategic decks, town halls, or organizational charts, or when we talk about change checklist alone. Those may support alignment, but they do not create them. The real work often happens underneath the visible structure of leadership. In the conversations people are willing to have, the assumptions leaders are willing to name, the tensions teams are willing to face, and the trust that either holds or fractures under pressure. I often tend to say my team alignment is not about agreement. Agreement can happen in a meeting. Alignment is tested after that meeting. Agreement may look like a big nod. Alignment shows up in ownership, a clarity, behavior, trust, and execution. Whenever I really put in some efforts on developing this episode of the talk show, I love to create some kind of a framework which I want the audience to take away from my leadership experience. Even today, I created one that has five dimensions. One, I said strategic alignment, that are we truly moving in the direction what we plan? And then I said, can we have a human alignment? Are the people connected in the direction are quietly just complying? Relational alignment, what conversations are happening? Are they being avoided? Cultural alignment, does the behavior match the values we claim? And execution alignment, of course, can be moved together with clarity, ownership, and coordination. At the center of all, we need to have a pillar that holds it, that is nothing but leadership presence. Because when pressure rises, people do not look at the plan, they look at the leader. They look for steadiness, honesty, clarity, and the courage to name what is really happening. So today, we are not just going to talk about alignment as a concept alone, we are going to explore the hidden work that makes this alignment really, really real. What conversations must leaders first have with themselves before they can expect alignment from others? That's the depth we are entering today. So let me bring in our leaders in conversation on leadership exchange, wherein I'm joined by three, one of the most super powerful. I would say I have met them so many times in conversation that they bring in every time new flavors, new perspectives, and I get to learn so much during those conversations. And today is one of them. Not only me, even the audience who are watching us are gonna take some good takeaways from that. So, firstly, I would like to introduce our own Vandana Das. Vandana understands what it means to build alignment across, of course, borders, cultures, communication styles, and different interpretations of leadership. Vandana, welcome.
Thank you, Husna. Very happy to be here. Thank you for such a warm welcome.
Thank you. And then we have Cheryl Torres. Cheryl has seen how alignment becomes essential when organizations are moving through complexity, change, and the large scale shifts. Welcome, Cheryl.
Thank you so much, Husna. It's great to be back on.
Thank you. Then, last but not the least, my friend Jamie. Jamie understands how alignment becomes real or fragile in the everyday work of leading teams, building trust, and creating ownership. We would have discussed tons and tons and tons of this between us and share a lot of perspectives around it. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you, Houston. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Jamie. And then, last but not the least, I myself, as a thought leader and a moderator of this episode, the human cost beneath the strategy, and I will be sharing from my own experience inside some of the complex organizations I have worked with from the lens of transformation, which I truly love, and the human, the most close to my heart, the cost that strategy really names. So, before we move in into our shared experiences and discussion, I would like to invite each one of you to respond briefly to the small part of what I want to hear from you. When you hear the phrase hidden work of alignment, what comes up from you from your own leadership experience? Let's start with anyone who would like to share this thought.
I can go first. So, Husna, I love the way that you framed the whole conversation. When you said hidden work of alignment, you brought in people, you brought in culture, you brought in relationships, and very nicely you said, agreement is different from alignment. You have agreement before the meeting, and you have alignment. Whether you have alignment is after the meeting. Loved it. Most usually what we see is that organizations stop at strategy and execution, right? And they think there's alignment. Rarely do you see organizations focusing on people, relationships, and I think culture comes really at the end. It's probably the most invisible, and it's really the lens through which people interpret everything else: the strategy, the relationships, the decisions, the behaviors. You could be perfectly aligned on paper and completely misaligned in reality, because people are reading the same situation through entirely different cultural assumptions. So I totally agree with you. And to me, what comes up is all that other part of your framework that you bring in, that is in play. All of these are in play when you are trying to get to an alignment in your collaborations, in your stakeholder engagement, in whatever decisions you are making. I'll stop there.
Sure. Thank you, Vandana.
Well, I'll add to all of this, thinking about what it is that leaders have to do, the voluminous amount of work. I mean, this is where leadership really happens to me. Leaders are accountable for alignment, but they don't do it alone. So while they're held accountable, they have to help their teams be able to author what that alignment looks like. They have to involve them and engage them and truly make sure that they're bought into it. But the leader needs to keep it on the rails. Their job is to offer clarity and facilitate that alignment process. So if they can do that effectively, everything else starts to fall into place. So that to me is the piece that's hidden, is the conversation that happens, the relationships that have to be built, the competence that has to be instilled in the team, the clarity that has to be provided to everybody to ensure they know what the purpose is and what we're moving towards. Because if there's a misunderstanding in that, there's no alignment. One thing goes wrong, everything will then also start to domino effect after that, it tends to be.
Oh, sure. That was a good example to use, domino effect. Thank you for the wonderful thought. Cheryl.
Yeah, I think just from listening to everyone, it's obvious that alignment is more than just the nice, pretty PowerPoint deck, right? That everyone has and is using in their presentations. It really is, do we believe in this transformation? Do we understand how to speak about it? Do we know where to go when we're sensing some tension, right? Because when we do feel that tension in a time of transformation, if it is not addressed with curiosity and understanding, it's going to be really hard to start to move forward. And oftentimes, what you might see as burnout or resistance, it's just a symptom of something significantly larger. And that was one of the things that I really liked about the model when we're looking at, is it a relational problem? Is it very rarely is it going to be the actual execution part of the model? Everybody's at this point, we've all gone to the classes. We know what a good execution plan looks like. We know what a good change management and comm strategy looks like. We've got all that written down on paper, but it's some of the underlying facets that really and truly are where we need to spend our time and effort and energy on. And in that moment, as we're seeing things start to come to the surface, we have to really start asking ourselves, where is this stemming from? Where have we had some misalignment? Who was in the room maybe shaking their head? Yes, but maybe they didn't quite get it because they didn't want to look bad, right? In this day and age, everybody is coming to the table with their own motivations. I'll say this day and age, this is in everything, right? In everything that we do. We're walking into situations with our own motivations and maybe showing up and saying, hey, I don't get it when everybody else is clearly nodding their head in alignment might be a risk for us as a leader. And I think that we have to be open-minded when we're leading these transformations, that these are not signals. There's something greater that's going on there. So you have to really dive deep into it.
Definitely, Cheryl, that is something so very resonatable when you say that, truly. So when I hear all these perspectives from three of you, I'd like to share some of the things which recently happened with me. I'd like to share that example and start our discussion. I worked alongside a leadership team during a significant structural shift. The strategy was very clear. Every executive could articulate it, as Cheryl mentioned. But yet, from my seat as a HR leader, I kept watching something different unfolding beneath the language. People had agreed to the direction, but no one had named what it actually cost. Who carried that weight? Where is the real resistance living? But that's what the transformation was asking of the people being asked to carry that weight. Over time, people became technically compliant but emotionally absent. They attended the meetings, they used the right language, but something had shifted underneath. Crucial conversations do not begin with the team, they begin with the leader. In that one situation, all five dimensions were present. That's where it struck me to bring this to the table today. Strategic alignment existed at the top. Human alignment was fragile. Relational alignment was under pressure. Cultural alignment was so unclear. And execution began to suffer. Leadership presence was the missing force, not the plan. The person in front of the plan. So my story happened inside one system. Vandana, you have to build alignment across cultures, borders, time zones, and entirely different ways people understand leadership itself. So can you please take us to one real situation where this alignment was just not about the work, but about different cultures, assumptions, communication styles, and the ways of understanding leadership?
Absolutely, Husna. Many situations come to my mind. Let me start with this one. Let me give this one first. It's about a woman who was being considered for a voluntary leadership role. She was capable, she was interested, and she was completely quiet about it. In the room, people started to read her silence as disengagement because people thought she did not want any responsibility. What was happening here was that she was working from her own cultural lens. So when I had a chance to talk with her, what I found was something very different. In her mind, stepping forward too visibly or being too eager could look like grabbing for power, like self-promotion. So she held back, not because she wasn't ready, but because in her cultural frame, restraint was the respectful thing to do. So what was hidden wasn't reluctance, it was meaning. And the same behavior, being quiet, understated, was carrying two completely opposite interpretations. For the people in the room, visible enthusiasm was a signal of readiness. For her, visible enthusiasm was the risk of looking power hungry. So it was the same behavior, two different cultural lenses were working here, and neither side knew the other lens existed. And so the shift really happened when we wanted to ask her, we started asking her, what does stepping forward feel like for you in this context? And it was very clear that it was completely different in her cultural context from what the dominant culture, the culture in which she was working was. So what for her was, she was attuned to her values of humility in that moment. She was respecting, she was aligned, let's say personal alignment with her personal values, but she was not really aligned with what the rest of the room was reading her as. And that was so, it was an eye-opener for me how culture can work.
Absolutely, absolutely. I completely agree when you say these things because culture makes so much of a difference from the values we bring, and people tend to misunderstand that part a lot. So, what was hidden beneath the surface when you had the conversation with her?
Yeah, as I said, when I had the conversation, I figured out that the right question to ask was, what does owning up or what does taking responsibility show up as for you? What does that mean for you? And obviously, she wanted the responsibility. She was very much eager to be the responsible person. What she was not wanting to portray, signal through her cultural lens was that she is grabbing what is powerful, what quote unquote powerful position, or that she is trying to self-promote her and be very visible. And she was working from that point of cultural lens.
For sure. Where did the alignment begin to shift?
When we started understanding, when she understood how she was being read as by the rest of the team, rest of the group, and when she understood that my behavior is signaling just the opposite of what I'm trying to signal. I want to be responsible, but it's being read as being someone who does not want to own the responsibility. And that's when alignment started to happen. And at the same time, I also took the time to speak to the other people who wanted to hand her the responsibility, who were thinking that she's probably not ready, or she's not confident, or she is not owning up responsibility, or she does not want the responsibility. When they began to understand that the cultural lens that is working here from her own cultural perspective, she is working at something else. She's aligning with her values, which are at this point or at any point humility. And so this was kind of breaking the communication there. There was that gap that was revealed.
Wow, that's really, yeah, a person like you with such a rich experience and a background who understands the human cultural context first and the value that adds to that. What was your learning experience about this particular piece of it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I have worked across cultures for many, many years now, and I see this play out all the time. I think the learning is pause before you start judging, and pause to think where exactly this behavior is coming from. And I think the best way to do is to really engage in conversation with the person where you start to see misalignment and understand, take the time to understand. And I think that typically, gives you a path ahead.
For sure. Yeah, from where that's where the coaching lens and the coaching perspectives, adding insights and taking them forward is becomes a responsible part of it. So Vandana, what Vandana is naming is the alignment is interpretive. Different people can hear the same message and make entirely different meanings. So Cheryl, your work sits at the intersection of transformation and strategic alignment. From your experience, where have you seen this alignment become essential during transformation or strategic change? What was the story behind the alignment of the work?
Yeah, thanks, Husna. So, one thing that I've learned in doing all of these transformations, when we have this tension, burnout, you name it, the problem was never really the problem. And what I'm taken back to is working on a mergers and acquisition project. Very clean on paper, very sound strategy. We had timelines, we had the work streams, and what really wasn't mapped well was the relational reality, right? We had two different leadership cultures, two sets of assumptions about how decisions should be made, two different definitions, even of what accountability looked like. And so it wasn't misalignment on strategy. Everybody did the head nod and we were good to move forward, but it was really that invisible operating system that's existing underneath. And what that showed up was, as we continue to move forward, execution friction. We have a missed handoff. We have a miscommunication. There's a decision that's made and it's not sticking for some reason. And so it's just because leaders are nodding in the room. And then when they were moving into their individual work streams with their groups, there was a different direction that was taking place afterward. And initially it reads as, oh, this is some sort of resistance or it's poor performance. If you look at it just like that, you might manage that wrong. And it was just really this misunderstanding of how we work together. What's the kind of the team agreement that we have as we're moving forward? And so really it was shifting, why isn't anybody following the plan, to what do people need in order to feel safe saying certain things out loud? What questions should we be raising so that we can truly understand that alignment is taking place? So it was just a very interesting experience for me, having two different leadership styles and cultures come together and get it aligned.
Oh, sure. I cannot really second this because I know what I go through when I'm doing this kind of a transformation. It's hard at one phase. Everything seems going so well. We sit so much in alignment. But what makes this work more complex, according to you?
Yeah, I think it's just the visibility problem because you don't necessarily know that that's the problem, so you keep targeting the symptoms, right? Okay, let's get different leaders in place. Or I've seen projects completely restart with completely new leadership, like a new project manager is going to be the thing that makes the difference. The tighter project management, the more governance, clear ownership, that necessarily isn't going to fix the problem because in this case, the problem was deeply relational in nature. And so, if we're not looking at that complex alignment work and digging deeply, you're going to continue to have the same stumbles. You have to get that down before the visible work, the to-do list can start getting checked off.
Hmm. That connects me to another layering question for you. Where did the leaders assume alignment really existed when it did not?
Yeah, I think it was at the point of the strategic level. I said, okay,
Mm-hmm.
this is what we're doing. This is how we're moving forward. Everything's great. No one left with any objections. Seems like a nice, tight plan. But at that point in time, when you're first delivering the strategy, most people are sitting there calculating what is safe for me to do at this moment? They're processing and they need time to do that. And you have to say, okay, can I disagree? Like they're sitting in their seats. Can I disagree in this moment? And how can I do that? And if you look around on a Teams channel and everybody's like, yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense, it makes it difficult for you to be the odd person out.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what happens is in this initial phases is really making sure that that universal alignment really truly does exist.
I'd like to question you on that a little bit. When you say universal alignment, when that has become possible?
Yeah. I think really giving people the space when you're doing a transformation, I think it's super helpful if you can meet with them before the big strategic alignment and give them the opportunity to understand
Mm-hmm.
and ask their questions one on one in a very safe space. Give them time to process it before you do a major launch. And then bringing everyone together. So they've had that opportunity to really ask questions before we're all nodding heads. And once you get that, you've got speed at your side because everybody is relationally aligned. We know what's going on. We've got that trust level built that might not have existed had you not taken that time. I think it's always a good space for someone who's leading transformation to, I know it gets hectic, but having that open door policy. Hey, if you're hearing something or feeling something that's not making sense, put time on my calendar. Let's talk through it because if you're not getting what you need and you're starting to feel misaligned, I want to make sure that we can fix that. And I think that means a lot to many, many people.
Definitely. I think that's where the human intelligence plays a role. When we say emotional intelligence, when we talk about psychological safety, all those protocols comes in place, and that's what the leadership sends at that level. That is very important. So thank you, Cheryl, for the beautiful share. So sometimes alignment does not mean at the enterprise level, it begins inside one team, one function, or one difficult conversation where people finally stop assuming and start clarifying. That's what I heard from Cheryl. Jamie, that exactly is your lens. Can you share something from your side of your professional experience where alignment had to be created within a team or function you led?
Sure. Well, and I would say, I preface all of this to say the the practice and some of the things I'll describe, they can be employed consistently across any size of team, from the enterprise level and from the top of any organization to every team in it. Ideally, if we all lived in a world where that was the case, could you imagine the difference? But anyway, okay, so to give you an example, sorry, just had to say that. To give you an example, the the experience that I had in my most recent corporate role, I had a fantastic team of professionals. And what I learned very quickly with that group is that my job as the leader was to get out of the way in a lot of different circumstances and to try to make sure that the team had the space and capacity to be able to do what it is that they knew was the right thing. And so what we did is we went through an exercise, and then this was an exercise we went through many a times thereafter on a reoccurring basis to be able to establish for ourselves as a team what our mission and purpose was in serving the organization. Because I knew what I thought it should be, right? Based on the conversations I'd have with C-level leaders and so on. But what did my team think it was? What did they see with the business partners they partnered with on a regular basis and that they served, right? So we would have ongoing conversation, but it started with that initial, hey, let's all sit down in a room together. And let's figure out, what is our team's purpose and mission? What are the values that we're going to engage with one another and those that we serve by? What are the strategies, projects, initiatives, programs, all the stuff that we're responsible for delivering for the organization, and being able to put that on paper? But it wasn't me telling them what it is that they needed to do. It was me allowing the space for them to be authors of this themselves too. And to the point that's been made already, which I think is so keenly important in a scenario like this, is there was trust. And so people did feel comfortable being able to ask questions. But it wasn't just the trust piece. The other part was, did they have the clarity of what it is the organization expected, what it is I had my eye on, and did they understand what everyone else on the team was there to contribute as well, and how they would support one another? So there are a lot of pieces to that, obviously, and it doesn't just happen in one conversation overnight. But that work and understanding and allowing everyone to understand what we're there to do, what it is that we're responsible for, how we can help others achieve the objectives the organization has of them, because of course we were a service team. That's the sort of critical understanding that they needed to be able to figure out what that alignment should be within our own team and what we're there to do. And so that was a really fun experience. And as I said, after many conversations, we continued that work. Every so often, we would come back to that. We would reaffirm change, whatever needed to be done, all of those practices and that understanding to make sure we were consistently staying in step and aligned with what the organization needed. Because if we weren't able to do that, we might as well all just pack our bags and go home, because we're obviously not earning the paychecks we're there to earn any longer.
Mhm. That's very beautiful, Jamie. I simply loved what you just shared. I completely agree, and I am a person who loves to gain feedback, stay aligned with the team. Leader is there with a vision that is meeting with the expectations of the management, the stakeholders, and at that level, of course, being aware, being whatever we call it. But are we really letting the team decide what they really want to look in a vision is very important, because that helps us understand the loopholes between the blind gaps. So we can really pick up some of those blind spots, which makes the leader in alignment with the team to help us process what we are looking forward to. That's a goal, that's the trust, and that's the mission we carry for the organization, because that's going to create space for growth and also meeting the goals, what we set as a leader and for the team and the organization. So I'd like to really add a little bit more flavors to the conversation of ours when I would like to ask you, what helped the team move from confusion to clarity? What happens when, if that kind of thing exists anytime? Because I know that you said that it was a clarity, it was given, it was already there, but in case not every single team member goes with the same zeal, what
Yep.
happens if there's some one missing element?
That's where things can go off the rails. But the good news is if you're paying attention, not just the leader, but others in the team, if they're empowered to also keep observationally aware of those sorts of things, when people seem to be confused, or maybe they're not, and again, doesn't mean that there's a bad intent. Sometimes that does happen, but that's a rarity. It's more often, as you said, they're just confused about something. And so it's trying to make sure that we take those opportunities to pause, slow down, and get everybody onto the same page. And so making it safe for people to be able to do that, Cheryl pointed this out already as well, that psychological safety, that's oftentimes where stuff like that comes from, is just simply people don't think it's okay. Or, to something that Donna said, it's the cultural understanding. When I use a particular phrase, set of words, idioms, all the things that we tend to do in like groups when we're sitting around people that we think have the same lens as us, that doesn't always translate for everybody. And so I've found that before, that I thought that I was being exceptionally clear, and there was someone in my team who that didn't jive for them the way that I intended. They didn't know they needed to ask the clarifying question. They thought they understood through their own context, but of course that created a misalignment. So it's being aware of those things and having someone like that happened. That did happen in my team, and I didn't observe and notice it. I had someone else on my team come to me and say, hey, I was talking to so and so at lunch. She thinks this, but I'm pretty sure you said this. I don't know why she thinks that. So we had a conversation. We were able to clear that up really quickly, but she explained to me, well, here's what that means to me. But okay, great. I need to think about, those sorts of things. So anyway, that sort of stuff happens. But again, it's the leader needs to keep their ear to the ground. but also each team member does as well, and needs to be thinking about how can they help support each other through that transition, because it's not always going to be easy for everybody, and not everyone moves at the same pace either.
Hmm. So when you say all those clarifying matters of whatever I heard you say, sometimes the office politics play a very bad and dirty role, as we are aware, especially when we are all going in alignment. So I'd like to understand from you, if that happens to become a problem, what would be one advice you'd like to give in the situation?
That's a fun one. That to me that's a leadership responsibility specifically. I always used to just say things like this to my team around my job is to do the blocking and tackling. So when you find that there's an impediment somewhere because of some politics, some sacred cow ideology that exists across another team, another person, whatever it is, that's the sort of stuff that you don't need to try to plow your way through that or find your way through it alone. You need to bring it to me because I can give you air cover. I can meet with that person and help figure out our path forward and find a compromise solution or whatever is going to be necessary. So that's the sort of stuff that I think does have to come back to a leader, those escalation points. And again, they may not be major, but that's where leaders then need to engage with one another and try to find the best path forward and going through being able to maintain the commitments each team has. So I always used to give that advice to my team, and I would encourage other leaders to think of it similarly, to be able to make sure that their team members know you're not on an island. Bring that stuff to me. I'll either help coach you through it or I'll take it on myself if it's particularly, tricky and could be problematic. That's what my job is to keep that stuff off your plate so you can get the work done. And I'll help navigate, those more complex pieces that might be a little risky.
Hmm. So, as you heard each other's experiences, what connections are you all noticing? Where do these stories overlap, even though the contexts are entirely different? So, here I would like to go with a small little brief questions for you, for each one of you. What is that one alignment mistake leaders often tend to make? So, let's start with Jamie itself.
Mistake they tend to make is they think it is exclusively their job to do it all and that they're there to give orders rather than giving ownership and authorship to those that they work with, whether they're team members or their other stakeholders throughout the organization. They take on too much. They think it's their entire job. So I think that's the biggest mistake I see.
Cheryl, I would like to ask you, what is that one conversation leaders avoid that later becomes costly?
Yeah, I think it really is this conversation of understanding the gap during this transformation of what the organization says. So from a different cultural lens than what Vandana was speaking to, like the organizational culture in and of itself, what are those values and how it operates? Many times leaders don't want to have that conversation mid-transformation because it can implicate them and they're part of this system. So I think cultural alignment shows up and breaks exactly on that gap. And so it's really important, kind of doubling down on that relational alignment piece. That's what's going to break first. It's those micro conversations that happen and subcultures start to get created around a project. And if you're not addressing that and saying, hey, where are we not meeting the needs, where are we not aligning on the values of our organization, you're going to continue to lose and erode trust and find yourself in a lot of misalignment very quickly.
That's absolutely true, Cheryl, for sure. An expertise like you can definitely share that experience. I agree with you. And then I would like to ask Vandana, where does alignment break first? Either at strategy, people, relationships, culture, or execution? Vandana.
Yeah, no, listening to Jamie and Cheryl, in addition to what they said, workplace culture, setting the tone, and taking too much, I think one thing that leaders, to your first question, I'll come to your question later, this one. I think most often leaders think a decision communicated is a decision understood, which is not a case most of the time. And I've faced this firsthand when I brought in a program, sponsorship program I was leading, I brought the implementers and decision makers together. And quickly the misalignment was very obvious. The organization was in the middle of reorg, and what the decision makers were thinking that they have communicated their decision, it's well understood, but the implementers were saying, was that we are in this chaos and we cannot we cannot communicate the way you have communicated to us, to our teams. It was only when the question shifted to not what, but why, that's when alignment started to form. Why did we make this decision? That's when the two groups started to come together. And that was, again, such a powerful moment. To your question, where the alignment breaks down first, I think it touches on all the things that all of you said, all three of you. I think in every part, even in strategy, anything you take, I think people is the first. If you talk about communication, you talk about implementation, it's the people who are implementing it. When you're doing strategy, it is about the people who will be working on the strategy. And then it's about the behaviors or their motivation, or whether you're able to support them or not. Are you being a supportive leader? Are you being an inspirational leader? That's all about a lot of culture, a lot of relational dimension working there. So I think a lot of it has to do with understanding people, being aligned with what people need to be supported, to be inspired, to be motivated, and to understand what the strategy is around. And then where you're from the perspective of culture, whether organizational culture that you've built, the tone that you've set up, is something that allows for people's own cultural nuances to be understood. Is there a space to ask questions? Is there a space to understand where the other person is coming from? So I think that's very important.
Definitely, Vandana, I agree. When you say that, especially when we talk about leader holds a lot of responsibility on the shoulders. And I feel that God gives every person a responsibility based on their trait, what they are and how they can shape, and what has the capacitator that will help them hold that position they are in. And it holds a lot of space, whether we plan a strategy, whether we build teams, whether we really lead a vision or transformation, what we talk about. So everything starts with a strong alignment of their own thought processes that holds the depth of their values and how they show up internally and externally. Well, that was really built. Good said, well said. I would like to move on with the next one for the final round of ours, wherein I would like each one of you to answer it the way you perceive this question. Based on your experiences, what is one practical alignment practice a leader can use immediately? A question, a conversation, a behavior, or a mistake to avoid?
I'll jump in if listening. I think that's probably the biggest, is really listening to what's going on so you can early and quickly identify where there might be those misalignment issues, or people that need greater clarity, people that need to understand the rationale, the why, as Vandana said. Like, that's such a great point. So I just want to underscore that. Listening. Leaders have got to listen.
Cheryl.
Yeah, I'd love to build on that because I have a yes and to listening. It's listening to not just what's being said in the room, but how is it being said? So how are those questions being framed? Are they questions that are asking, how do we move forward? Are they questions that are helping guide that conversation? Or are they of a different nature? Are they starting to sound a little bit more self-protective? Is it someone who's really looking to get some answers of like, well, what does this impact for me? If you're starting to see something like that, that might be an early indicator of what's, a relational misalignment that is starting to happen. And so for leaders in the room, get curious. If you have to, ask a diagnostic question at the end of your meetings. We do it commonly in coaching, right? What is the one question you wish I would have asked that I didn't ask? What is the one topic that we didn't cover that you wish would have been covered? Just so you can continue to make sure that people are feeling heard and that they have a space and an opportunity to do that.
For sure, for sure. I would like to add another question to whatever Cheryl just said. What is the one truth which a leader themselves do not tell themselves what they're looking forward to in anything, what they are really trying to execute or perform? So that also help them understand their own realities and truth of their own. Vandana, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, again, this is a yes and answer. So yes to all three of you. Absolutely listening. I think behavior really signals a lot of things about what the leader is embodying. because, I'm a big proponent of what you feel inside is usually what appears outside is reflected magnetically or whatever in the way you show up. So I think being aligned with your values and then watching your behavior, because your behavior then signals whether you are open to listening, whether you are open to creating a psychological safety within your workplace culture. And a behavior can be many things. It can be a behavior of, okay, accepting what went wrong. Behavior shows many things what's going on in your head. So I would say a leader must listen, of course, make space to ask curious questions or ask questions, show curiosity, and then understand what your employees or people around you are seeing you as, and what you want to show up as, have an alignment in that. And through that, a lot of things start to become clear. Clarity becomes a very important, powerful tool in your leadership. So I think that's important.
Awesome, Vandana. Definitely behavior plays extremely good role, because whether it's actions, whether your language, and whether you speak, your expressions as a leader makes a huge difference. That really creates a language of its own. That was really awesome share. So these are the practices worth carrying. And as I reflect on everything what we shared today, I want to close with something from my own lens. What I'm taking away from this conversation is that alignment is not agreement. It's not nod. It's not silence in the room, but the deeper work of helping people understand the trust and carry the direction together. And from my own lens as a coach, alignment is not what leaders say that their values are. It is whether the people experience those values in the decisions leaders make under pressure, in the conversations they choose to have or to avoid, and in what they're willing to name when it becomes very uncomfortable. That gap between the value declared and the value which lived, as all of the leaders just mentioned in our conversation today, where alignment quietly begins to fracture most often. Because alignment is not the same as activities, it is a quiet coherence between what leaders just say, what teams understand, and what the organization is truly ready to carry together. That delta is where leadership is truly tested. It's the gap between what leaders intend and what people actually understand, trust, and carry. So I want to leave you all with this. Alignment is not absence of tension. It's the presence of truth, trust, and leadership strong enough to hold both. That's where alignment begins. Not in the deck, not in the meeting, but in the leader's capacity to hold what others are still trying to understand. So the questions I want to leave with the audience are: where in your leadership system are people agreeing on the surface but misaligned beneath? And do your people experience your leadership the way you intend to show up? Thank you, leaders. It was beautiful having you all on my conversation today. I simply love our conversations because you guys teach me more than whatever I know or what we claim to know. And thank you, audience, for joining us on Leadership Exchange. Stay tuned, stay connected. And today, I would like to make an appeal to all the audience who watch us on Leadership Exchange. Any of the topics, any of the conversation with our leaders on the show, if you resonate, if you like to be open to come on this platform and share that experience and learn more, or have more questions that you are experiencing today, please feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn, as well as please do really leave a message on YouTube channel as well. Thank you again. Thank you once again, all leaders present on the show today. Take care. Bye now.
Thank you.
Thank you.